Good afternoon and welcome to our daily live coverage of the latest in local and regional news as we dive into the latest updates and provide you with breaking news up to this hour. As we enter the second consecutive month since the heinous Iranian attacks on the state of Kuwait and the region, significant developments have unfolded over the past 24 hours leading up to this moment. The Ministry of Information calls upon all citizens and residents to rely exclusively on verified resources, and through this coverage we will continue to deliver all pertinent updates on both the local and regional fronts. The official spokesperson of the Ministry of Defense, Colonel Saud Al-Atwan, announced that Kuwait's air defenses have been engaging since 8 a.m. this morning against an intense wave of hostile Iranian attacks, intercepting 28 drones targeting the state of Kuwait. In a press statement, Al-Atwan said that Kuwait's armed forces successfully intercepted a large number of hostile drones, some which have targeted vital oil installations and power stations in the south of the country, resulting in significant material damage to oil infrastructure facilities, power plants, and water desalination plants. He added that the General Staff of the Army affirms its commitment to exerting all efforts to monitor and counter these vicious attacks, praying to Allah Almighty to keep Kuwait safe and secure.
في ظل الأوضاع الراهنة معكم اليوم وزارة التجارة والصناعة المعنية في ملف الأمن الغذائي. اليوم نطمنكم بأن الوضع التمويني مستقر تماما ولا يوجد أي نقص في المواد الغذائية الأساسية. كذلك حركة الأسواق طبيعية والسلع متوفرة في نقاط البيع والمخازن بشكل منتظم. إنتاج المياه في المصانع المحلية مستمر على مدار الساعة لضمان تلبية احتياجات الجميع. سلاسل الإمداد تعمل بشكل طبيعي وسلس ولا توجد أي عوائق في تدفق السلع إلى الأسواق. كما أن الأسواق المركزية وجميع نقاط البيع تعمل بشكل طبيعي، والجمعيات التعاونية تواصل نشاطها المعتاد دون أي تأثير. ونؤكد على الجاهزية الكاملة لخطط الطوارئ مع استمرار فرق الرقابة التجارية في متابعة الأسواق ميدانيا بشكل يومي لضمان استقرار الأسعار وتوفر السلع الأساسية فيها. لذلك اليوم احنا نطمنكم ونبشركم بأن الأمور طيبة إن شاء الله ويحافظ الله.
Now, to kick off this live coverage, joining us now from Poland is geopolitical expert Dr. Khaled Zainuddin to discuss the implications of the ceasefire, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and what it means for China, the global energy markets, and the shifting of geopolitical dynamics. First of all, Dr. Khaled, thank you for being here with us.
Good afternoon.
Now, the Ministry of with the U.S. and Iran's agreeing to a 2-week ceasefire tied to reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, how are the GCC states recalibrating their security and energy strategies in response to this fragile pause?
Yeah, the Gulf Cooperation Council countries will work on evaluating their military and security strategy by building an effective Gulf defense system without relying on external systems. In addition, they will work on diversifying their alliance in line with the agreements between Pakistan, for example, as it was with Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, and also strengthen Islamic cooperation and alliances with the major powers such as China, Russia, and other Asian countries.
Mm-hmm. Now, as Gulf countries push for a UN resolution to secure maritime routes, which ultimately failed due to the division among major powers, what does this reveal about the GCC ability to mobilize international support during this crisis?
Security maritime routes by force and the failure to pass a resolution in the Security Council due to Russian and Chinese opposition will lead to political tensions between the Gulf states and China and Russia from the second side. This will impact the contractual cooperation between China, Russia, and Gulf states following the previous significant rapprochements and cooperation between them. This will compel Russia and China to reassess to the Gulf state and provide guarantees regarding Iran and its violations of the Gulf sovereignty. It will also push the Gulf state to seek alternative routes to the Strait of Hormuz, thus strengthening the prospect of another waterway that would weaken Iran's leverage over the Strait of Hormuz.
Now, Dr. Khalid, with regards to mediation efforts involving regional and external actors, including Pakistan, how are the GCC states positioning themselves diplomatically in shaping a longer-term regional settlement?
The Gulf states will work to strengthen their local military capabilities and deepen their partnership to protect their borders and economies. Their diplomacy will be broader and deeper, focusing on resolving internal problems and preventing the widening of the gap between member states. This will enhance their diplomatic capacity to expand and exert pressure on major and influential powers to prevent renewed conflict, protect borders, promote peace among nations, secure waterways, increase research, economic, industrial, and strategic cooperation, prevent instability, open channels of dialogues within their territories.
But Doctor, how do you assess the risk of renewed escalation, and what does this mean for global stability?
Of course, to ensure regional securities for waterways, shipping lanes, and supply chains. The risk of renewed regional conflicts depend on competition between major powers. This competition masks internal conflict, poverty, ignorance, and external entanglements, ideological mobilization, brainwashing, and the support of ignorance and extremism. But what truly promotes peace curbs extremism and prioritizes its own interest over those of other nations will inevitably prevent conflicts.
Dr. Khalid, you also mentioned earlier comments about China and the Strait of Hormuz. Now, yes, as Russia and China opposed UN efforts to secure the Strait of Hormuz while utilizing their veto in the UN Security Council, are we witnessing a broader fragmentation of the international system, and is it weakening of multinational institutions?
China wants to use a war between Iran and the United States of America and Israel as a geopolitical files against America, because they wanted to have more influences on Asian issues, for example, about the future of Taiwan, about the future of relation and the power and investment of American military and economically in the Asia, and about from second side, Russia wants to use the war to pressure on American relation, international relation, and American foreign relations with European Union to finish the war, to open the border between Russia, and about the sanctions, about handle, about exchange, economic, and about the gas, about the oil, about the future of West and East Europe. And the war disrupt production, supply chains, and materials, and the closed seas, canals, and shipping routes, impacting energy, transportation, and manufacturing prices. This leads to exorbitant and debilitating production costs, negatively affecting competitiveness, and ultimately causing factory closures and increased unemployment. All these problems since COVID, than the war in Sudan, than the war between Ukraine and Russia. It destroyed the dream of European economic, the dream of European factories, the dream of European nation to be a power, external and internal, in relation and in economic and in exporting and in future relation with the Gulf, with the Middle East, with Asia. The war between Russia and Ukraine lead Union Europe to be back to the history when was the rising of the economy in Germany and in Korea. Then the United States of America will change the system of the world and made them weaker and became the only power country and only the international and external relation in the world in the hand, the defense of Europe and defense in the world in the hand of America.
Dr. Khalid, you mentioned a few quite interesting points there. Now with the rising prices of oil and the inflation rate, how could this conflict reshape economic alliances and trade partners, as you mentioned earlier, particularly between East and West?
Yes, Union Europe was, after Second World War and after the Cold War, the Union Europe built Schengen military and Schengen economically and the Schengen internal relation, but they left the external relation and the decision of defense in hand of America. Now, as I told you, after the war between, after COVID and after war between Russia and Ukraine, war disrupted production, disrupted the supply chains and materials and closed seas, canals, shipping routes, exchange between Russia and Europe. The price of oil, the gas raised 4 times, shipping routes raised, impacting energy raised, transportation, manufacturing prices. This leads to exorbitant and debilitating production costs, negatively affecting on the internal economy, on internal manufacturing, on the competitiveness, and ultimately causing factories closed and increased unemployment for European Union, for France, for Germany, for Poland, for every country. Now, these countries, they are searching about peace. They are searching to close the war. They are searching how to save their economics to their nations, their countries, and even many countries in Union Europe. Now they are discussing that why we have Union Europe, what's giving us the relation between East and West Europe, and the negative effect for the European economic, for the France, for German economic, for Sweden economic. They are destroying now from different geopolitical reasons and economical reasons and political and security reasons. They are searching how to finish the war with Russia, how to be back in the relation, how to buy from Russia, because Russia and Europe, they have exchanged borders. They are besides they can be back to the relations and the exchanging of chemicals, of oils, of economy, of resources, of materials with less cost than importing from Asia or from Middle East or from America.
Now, as a geopolitical expert, Dr. Khalid, now with over 40 countries coordinated response to protect shipping routes during the crisis, how might this level of international involvement redefine a future security framework for critical global checkpoint?
We cannot secure it. Briefly, we cannot secure it without the agreement between the main 3 powers in the world, between Russia and America and China. They are only the countries who has power on Iran, power on the countries who are on the seas, who has a geopolitical and geographic strategic points, who can control the canals, who can control the seas, who can control the routes, only these three countries. If they will have agreements between them, as we saw the power of China on Iran stopped for 2 weeks the war and will open or will reopen again the Hormuz Canal.
And before we let you go, Dr. Khaled, as European countries, including Poland, navigate between the supporting allies and avoiding deeper military involvement, how is this conflict reshaping political priorities and foreign policies in calculations across Europe?
We mentioned it. The war disrupts the production. The production disrupts the supply and disrupts the chains and the materials. And raise the price of shipping, of impacting energy, of transportation, of manufacturing. These countries now they are searching how to build an internal economy, internal resources, how to have foreign relations with countries with less problems, less wars, and how to reply and relay the relation and the discussion between United States of America, between China, with Russia, with regions. Because, for example, Poland now they are working hardly to save the economy, to make less unemployment, to decrease unemployment, to raise the work of factories, to fight against negatively affecting of the production, to reopen a new relation of transportation, of exchanging, of external and internal, as we saw that now Poland and the other European countries, they are going to build a relation with Asian countries. We saw with Vietnam, with, for example, Sri Lanka, with new countries to save and to find new resources if it will be closed from other side.
Geopolitical expert from Poland, Dr. Khaled Zaideddine, we appreciate your input. Dear viewers, let's take a quick break and we'll continue with our live coverage.
تؤكد جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي جاهزيتها للاستجابة للطوارئ والكوارث في ظل الأوضاع الجيوسياسية الحاصلة في المنطقة. جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي تعمل من ضمن منظومة إنسانية متكاملة مع مؤسسات دولة الكويت من حيث الاستجابة السريعة وتجهيز المتطوعين من ضمن أفرقة مختلفة للاستجابة للطوارئ في سرعة قصوى. يعد متطوعين جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي من المتطوعين اللي تم تدريبهم مكثفاً في الإسعافات الأولية والاستجابة للكوارث والاستجابة الميدانية. تؤكد جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي جاهزيتها الميدانية ورفع جاهزيتها من حيث الاستجابة للطوارئ في حالات اللي يتم ندائها. بالنسبة للمخزون الاستراتيجي لجمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي فإحنا على أتم الاستعداد للاستجابة في حال النداء من قبل مؤسسات حكومة دولة الكويت.
Welcome back. We're continuing our live coverage of the daily updates from Kuwait and the region. Now, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs expressed the state of Kuwait's welcome of the announcement by U.S. President Donald Trump of a ceasefire agreement between the United States and Iran. Kuwait condemned the effort exerted to reach this agreement, particularly the role played by the Islamic Republic of Pakistan in preventing further escalation in the region. In a statement issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs today, the state of Kuwait affirmed its support for all mediation efforts and endeavors aimed at restoring calm, expressing hope that this agreement will lead to a comprehensive and sustainable settlement that enhances security and stability in the region. Kuwait also stressed the importance of full adherence to the ceasefire agreement to ensure its consolidation and create the conditions for dialogue. The state of Kuwait further emphasized the need to guarantee freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz and all maritime waterways in accordance with the provisions of the 1982 UN Conventions on Law of the Sea. The state of Kuwait is implementing measures to secure essential goods and stabilize prices of global food markets face rising volatility driven by geopolitical tensions, supply chain disruption, and increasing energy and transportation costs. Meanwhile, global food security is increasingly under strain as conflict, rising energy, and fertilizer costs disrupt supply chain, drive price volatility and deepen hunger risk across vulnerable region worldwide. Here's more.
The state of Kuwait is taking proactive steps to safeguard the availability and affordability of essential goods amid mounting global pressures on food supply chains, driven by escalating geopolitical tensions and rising production costs. The acting Undersecretary of the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Marwa Al Jaidan, confirmed that Ministerial Decision number 30 of the year 2026 aims to ensure the uninterrupted flow of key commodities into the country while maintaining price stability for both citizens and residents. The Undersecretary explained that the decision focuses on supporting importers by compensating for the additional cost incurred due to recent global disruptions. The mechanism for calculating this support is based on the difference between import costs prior to February the 28th and the actual costs incurred afterwards. This includes increases in product prices, shipping fees, and insurance costs, while excluding routine expenses such as local warehousing. The policy is designed to shield consumers from sudden price spikes, while ensuring that suppliers remain able to sustain imports under increasingly volatile market conditions. These domestic measures come at a time of significant upheaval in global food markets. After a period of relative easing throughout 2025, agricultural commodity prices have begun to fluctuate unevenly in recent months. The ongoing conflict in the Middle East, particularly tensions affecting key transit routes such as the Strait of Hormuz, has introduced new risk to global supply chains. Disruptions to oil and fertilizer flows have driven up production and transportation costs, with ripple effects across food systems worldwide. According to international estimates, fertilizer prices have surged sharply, with urea prices increasing by nearly 46% within a single month. This spike reflects both immediate supply disruptions and long-term structural pressures, including higher energy costs and constrained production capacity. These developments are critical, as fertilizers are a key input in agricultural production, and rising costs can directly impact crop yields and future food availability. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, or the FAO, has reported consecutive increases in its food price index, which rose by about 2.4% in March, largely due to higher energy prices linked to the regional conflict. Vegetable oil prices recorded the steepest increase, climbing over 5%, while staple grains such as wheat, maize, and rice also showed upward trends compared to previous months. Although global cereal supplies remain relatively stable for now, analysts warn that prolonged disruption could alter this balance. Beyond pricing, the broader outlook for food security is becoming increasingly concerning. Conflict and climate-related shocks continue to drive hunger across vulnerable regions, with tens of millions of people in Africa alone projected to face acute food insecurity by mid-2026. The World Food Programme has warned that the current crisis could push an additional 45 million people into severe hunger if conditions worsen. Rising energy and freight costs are also reshaping agricultural production decisions. Farmers are being forced to reconsider planting strategies, potentially opting for lesser fertilizer-intensive crops or reducing cultivated areas altogether. Such shifts could have lasting impacts on global food supplies, extending price pressures well into the future.
تؤكد وزارة الكهرباء والماء والطاقة المتجددة بأن عمليات توليد الطاقة الكهربائية وتحلية المياه تسير وفق الخطط التشغيلية المعتادة، وتؤكد الوزارة على جاهزيتها التامة للتعامل مع أي طارئ من خلال خطط متكاملة تتضمن الإجراءات الواجب اتباعها لاستمرارية الكهرباء والماء. وتوفر لدى الوزارة كفاءات وطنية مؤهلة وعلى أعلى درجات الاستعداد لتفعيل هذه الخطط متى ما دعت الحاجة. والمخزون الاستراتيجي من المياه العذبة في البلاد في ازدياد، إلى جانب توفر مخزون من المياه الجوفية، مما يعزز قدرة المنظومة الوطنية على الصمود والتعامل مع مختلف الظروف.
في ظل الأوضاع الراهنة، معكم اليوم وزارة التجارة والصناعة المعنية في ملف الأمن الغذائي. اليوم نطمنكم بأن الوضع التمويني مستقر تماماً ولا يوجد أي نقص في المواد الغذائية الأساسية. كذلك حركة الأسواق طبيعية والسلع متوفرة في نقاط البيع والمخازن بشكل منتظم. إنتاج المياه في المصانع المحلية مستمر على مدار الساعة لضمان تلبية احتياجات الجميع. سلاسل الإمداد تعمل بشكل طبيعي وسلس ولا توجد أي عوائق في تدفق السلع إلى الأسواق، كما أن الأسواق المركزية وجميع نقاط البيع تعمل بشكل طبيعي، والجمعيات التعاونية تواصل نشاطها المعتاد دون أي تأثير. ونؤكد على الجاهزية الكاملة لخطط الطوارئ مع استمرار فرق الرقابة التجارية في متابعة الأسواق ميدانياً بشكل يومي لضمان استقرار الأسعار وتوفر السلع الأساسية فيها. لذلك اليوم احنا نطمنكم ونبشركم بأن الأمور طيبة إن شاء الله ويحافظ الله.
تؤكد جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي جاهزيتها للاستجابة للطوارئ والكوارث في ظل الأوضاع الجيوسياسية الحاصلة في المنطقة. جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي تعمل من ضمن منظومة إنسانية متكاملة مع مؤسسات دولة الكويت من حيث الاستجابة السريعة وتجهيز المتطوعين من ضمن أفرقة مختلفة للاستجابة للطوارئ في سرعة قصوى. يعد متطوعين جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي من المتطوعين اللي تم تدريبهم مكثفاً في الإسعافات الأولية والاستجابة للكوارث والاستجابة الميدانية. تؤكد جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي جاهزيتها الميدانية ورفع جاهزيتها من حيث الاستجابة للطوارئ في حالات اللي يتم ندائها. بالنسبة للمخزون الاستراتيجي لجمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي، فإحنا على أتم الاستعداد للاستجابة في حال النداء من قبل مؤسسات حكومة دولة الكويت.
الحرس الوطني قادة وقوات دائما على استعداد وجاهزية تامة لحماية الوطن بالتعاون مع زملاء السلاح في وزارتي الدفاع والداخلية وقوة الإطفاء العام، وتقديم الدعم والإسناد لكافة جهات الدولة خاصة في أوقات الأزمات والطوارئ. ونسأل الله أن يحفظ وطننا الكويت من كل مكروه في ظل قيادته الرشيدة.
في ظل الأوضاع الراهنة، معكم اليوم وزارة التجارة والصناعة المعنية في ملف الأمن الغذائي. اليوم نطمنكم بأن الوضع التمويني مستقر تماماً ولا يوجد أي نقص في المواد الغذائية الأساسية. كذلك حركة الأسواق طبيعية والسلع متوفرة في نقاط البيع والمخازن بشكل منتظم. إنتاج المياه في المصانع المحلية مستمر على مدار الساعة لضمان تلبية احتياجات الجميع. سلاسل الإمداد تعمل بشكل طبيعي وسلس ولا توجد أي عوائق في تدفق السلع إلى الأسواق، كما أن الأسواق المركزية وجميع نقاط البيع تعمل بشكل طبيعي، والجمعيات التعاونية تواصل نشاطها المعتاد دون أي تأثير. ونؤكد على الجاهزية الكاملة لخطط الطوارئ مع استمرار فرق الرقابة التجارية في متابعة الأسواق ميدانياً بشكل يومي لضمان استقرار الأسعار وتوفر السلع الأساسية فيها. لذلك اليوم احنا نطمنكم ونبشركم بأن الأمور طيبة إن شاء الله ويحافظ الله.
Welcome back to our daily live coverage as we continue to bring you the latest updates from Kuwait and the region. But first up, OPEC Plus will raise oil output by 206,000 barrels per day in May amid Middle East conflict as global energy market faces heightened uncertainty and disruptions of supplies. Here's more.
The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, and its allies, collectively known as OPEC Plus, announced a modest increase in oil production of 206,000 barrels per day, effective in May. The decision was made following a virtual meeting attended by key members, including Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, Kazakhstan, Algeria, and Oman, who reviewed current market conditions and the global energy outlook. During the discussions, the 8 countries highlighted the critical importance of safeguarding international maritime routes to ensure uninterrupted energy flows, especially amid the ongoing military conflict in the Middle East. They expressed concern over repeated attacks on energy infrastructure, emphasizing that repairing damaged assets is both costly and time-consuming. OPEC Plus has scheduled its next meeting for May 3rd to assess the situation and consider further adjustments to production. Since February 28th, the regional conflict has disrupted energy flows significantly, with shipments of crude oil and refined products declining sharply. On the trading front, Brent crude futures fell slightly by $0.29 or 0.3% to $109.48 per barrel, while the U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude WTI rose $2.58 or 2.3% to $114.99 per barrel, approaching its highest settlement since June 2022. Analysts note that WTI has been gaining momentum amid market expectations of prolonged supply disruption rather than near-term resolution. In European and Asian spot markets, refineries are paying record premiums, with some crude grade approaching $150 per barrel in immediate delivery trades, underscoring the severe supply pressure triggered by the conflict. Despite mounting pressure from the United States, Iran has not indicated any compliance with President Donald Trump. Trump warned of significant retaliation if Iran did not lift its blockade by the specified deadline, while Tehran stated that it would respond to any attacks on its infrastructure and warned Gulf allies of potential consequences. Efforts at mediation, including those facilitated by Pakistan, continue, but Iran has rejected temporary ceasefire proposals, insisting on a permanent end to the conflict. Meanwhile, attacks on Iranian bridges, roads, railways, and petrochemical facilities have intensified, further complicating regional trade flows. The disruption in Gulf oil exports has contributed to unexpected windfalls for some exporters, including Iran and Oman and Saudi Arabia, while other producers have suffered financial losses. Shipping data indicate that Saudi Arabia's crude exports from Yanbu decreased by approximately 15% on a weekly basis to 3.9 million barrels per day during the week starting March 30th. Iraqi officials have indicated that Basra's crude exports could return to 3.4 million barrels per day if the conflict ends and the Hormuz Strait reopens. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) has warned that the ongoing conflict will likely weigh heavily on the global economy, pushing inflation higher and slowing growth. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva indicated that even a swift resolution would likely force the IMF to revise down global growth projections while raising inflation forecasts. Before the conflict, the IMF has projected 3.3% growth for 2026 and 3.2% in 2027, reflecting post-pandemic recovery. The crisis is expected to dominate discussions at the upcoming IMF and World Bank spring meeting in Washington as global leaders consider the broad economic impact of the Middle East conflict.
Welcome back to our daily live coverage, bringing you the latest updates from Kuwait and the region. Now, joining me live is Austria's parliament member, Mr. Andreas Minich, who's joining us from Yerevan in Armenia. Mr. Andreas, first of all, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me on this interview again.
Now, as we know, most European countries are following up on the situation in the Middle East. Now, after the crisis, the ceasefire been announced, you've noticed that there has been repeated attacks on the region, 28 of which were hit in Kuwait following the ceasefire. I would like to get your thoughts on this, please.
Thank you so much for this first statement. It is now still a world crisis, how we see it, and with the announced ceasefire, we will see how much it will be worth. President Trump managed to get this ceasefire spoken out with a lot of pressure on the Islamic Republic. But when we see, on the other hand, that there is more than 28 drone attacks towards Kuwait and other parts of the regions, then we are questioning how much the ceasefire could be worth, how much this ceasefire can really deliver a pathway to peace. That's going to be very interesting. And for us, the big question is how much will be the word worth from the Islamic Republic.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Andres, we also there has been a lot of involvement by many European countries through collective or individual action been taken to either help with the ceasefire or broker a deal to pass the Strait of Hormuz and safeguard other interests. What is your foreign policy on this take during this time?
It's unfortunately a very difficult situation right now. Everybody hopes for a diplomatic solution, that with this ceasefire, we will have a way out of this world crisis. In this former report, you have stated, and we have heard, that the IMF is warning about increasing prices, bigger inflation, maybe coming up of a recession, not only slowing down growth, that we will be getting really into big troubles. That's why it is very important that the Strait of Hormuz gets opened as quickly as possible, and that we will find a way back to normalization. Mm-hmm. And all European Union countries are very interested in getting this forward in this direction.
Mr. Andres, before we let you go, we appreciate you being here with us. Any final thoughts on the current situation in the Middle East?
I think it is very, very difficult. We are showing complete solidarity with you. I think if it's not possible to have any sign of this ceasefire, I think it will unfortunately escalate to a very bad point. And therefore we are very much worried. We hope that there will be a diplomatic solution. We hope that it will succeed, but there has to be a stop with all the attacks towards Kuwait and in the region. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Andres Menech, Austria's parliament member. We appreciate your input. Dear viewers, let's take a quick break and we'll continue with our live coverage.
الأوضاع الراهنة معكم اليوم وزارة التجارة والصناعة المعنية في ملف الأمن الغذائي. اليوم نطمنكم بأن الوضع التمويني مستقر تماما ولا يوجد أي نقص في المواد الغذائية الأساسية. كذلك حركة الأسواق طبيعية والسلع متوفرة في نقاط البيع والمخازن بشكل منتظم. إنتاج المياه في المصانع المحلية مستمر على مدار الساعة لضمان تلبية احتياجات الجميع. سلاسل الإمداد تعمل بشكل طبيعي وسلس ولا توجد أي عوائق في تدفق السلع إلى الأسواق. كما أن الأسواق المركزية وجميع نقاط البيع تعمل بشكل طبيعي والجمعيات التعاونية تواصل نشاطها المعتاد دون أي تأثير. ونؤكد على الجاهزية الكاملة لخطط الطوارئ مع استمرار فرق الرقابة التجارية في متابعة الأسواق ميدانياً بشكل يومي لضمان استقرار الأسعار وتوفر السلع الأساسية فيها. لذلك اليوم احنا نطمنكم ونبشركم بأن الأمور طيبة إن شاء الله ويحافظ الله.
Welcome back once again to our daily live coverage, bringing you the latest updates and breaking news from Kuwait and the region. U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire with Iran just hours before the deadline of Tehran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face major attacks on civilian infrastructure. Now, the agreement, mediated by Pakistan, is contingent on Iran pausing its blockade of critical oil and gas shipment through the strategic waterway. President Trump described the move as a double-sided ceasefire, saying military objectives have been achieved and progress made towards a long-term peace deal. In response, Iran accepted the 2-week ceasefire deal and to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, confirming that Tehran will begin talks on Friday in Islamabad.
تأكد جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي جاهزيتها للاستجابة للطوارئ والكوارث في ظل الأوضاع الجيوسياسية الحاصلة في المنطقة. جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي تعمل من ضمن منظومة إنسانية متكاملة مع مؤسسات دولة الكويت من حيث الاستجابة السريعة وتجهيز المتطوعين من ضمن أفرقة مختلفة للاستجابة للطوارئ في سرعة قصوى. يعد متطوعين جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي من المتطوعين اللي تم تدريبهم مكثفاً في الإسعافات الأولية والاستجابة للكوارث والاستجابة الميدانية. تؤكد جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي جاهزيتها الميدانية ورفع جاهزيتها من حيث الاستجابة للطوارئ في حالات اللي يتم ندائها. بالنسبة للمخزون الاستراتيجي لجمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي فإحنا على أتم الاستعداد للاستجابة في حال النداء من قبل مؤسسات حكومة دولة الكويت.
توجيهات مباشرة ومتابعة حثيثة ومتواصلة من قبل مجلس الوزراء ووزيرة الشؤون الاجتماعية الدكتورة أمثال الحويلة، سارعت وزارة الشؤون إلى وضع الخطط المسبقة التي تهدف من خلالها إلى المحافظة على مستويات المخزون الاستراتيجي من السلع المواد الغذائية والاستهلاكية ولضمان سلاسة وسهولة تدفقها إلى الأسواق التعاونية. قامت وزارة الشؤون ممثلة بقطاع التعاون بتشكيل 6 فرق ميدانية بواقع فريق لكل محافظة، وذلك للمتابعة اليومية للتأكد من كفاية المخزون الاستراتيجي. إن هذا العمل هو ثمرة تنسيق وتخطيط مسبق مع جهات الدولة المختصة التي وضعت لضمان استدامة الأمن الغذائي في مختلف الأوقات، ودامت الكويت بحفظ الله ورعايته.
We are still here with you. Joining us now live is Najib Al-Khash, our correspondent from Tokyo, to discuss Japan's energy vulnerability amid the Strait of Hormuz crisis, strategies to secure the supply, economic impacts, and Tokyo's diplomatic and potential mediation role. Mr. Najib, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Now, to what extent does Japan's reliance on Middle Eastern oil, particularly through the Strait of Hormuz, constitute a strategic vulnerability under the current crisis?
Well, Japan thought that since the region is under the umbrella of American protection, the same umbrella that Japan and South Korea are under, so there was like an understanding that within this system, Japan's oil supplies would be guaranteed and that there would be no problem. Although, of course, Japan has suffered in the past. For example, in the 1973 Arab-Israeli war, Japan suffered immensely, and that was called the oil shock. And from that moment on, Japan compiled huge strategic deposits of oil with the understanding that even if there is another war, that this stockpile would be enough to go through it. And this is what happened actually during the first Gulf War. As the crisis, I mean, Japan was able to handle the crisis because of its stockpiles that are enough for up to around 9 months.
Mm-hmm. Are there any real concerns in Tokyo about the supply disruptions if the strait remains closed?
Yes, of course, because this is the lifeline for Japan. It's true that the gas comes from elsewhere, but the petroleum, the oil, all comes from the Middle East. And for Japan, this is a really big predicament because the country itself doesn't have any oil resources. Mm-hmm. And also the other big producer next to Japan, which is Russia, relations, I mean, energy relations have been severed since a while after the start of the Russian-Ukrainian war.
You also mentioned earlier that Japan holds strategic oil reserves covering around 9 months, I think you said, of consumption. How much of a real safety cushion does that provide?
Well, 9 months is relatively a very long term. I mean, to get an image, we have to compare with other countries. Usually, the countries around Japan have stockpiles that some countries have stockpiles for like 2 weeks. Other countries have for 1 month or maybe 2 months. China is now building huge reserves. Currently, China is the number one worldwide when it comes to the volume of oil stockpiled. However, when we look at the size of the Chinese economy and the Chinese population and compare that with Japan, we see that the stockpiles currently in China are only enough for a few months. Japan is number one in the world when it comes to the length of the period. So I think Japan is the safest country in this sense, but still nobody knows how long this crisis will continue.
You also mentioned that Japan has already looked into alternatives, but can Japan realistically compensate for any shortfall through alternative suppliers outside the Middle East?
Well, it is realistic to think about importing oil from Russia. That can happen fast if the United States allows that. On the other hand, there are more long-term projects, oil projects in the United States. Trump administration would like Japan to buy oil from America. And it seems that Trump has grand plans. There have been some articles here about the fact that Trump would like Venezuela to be an alternative as oil resource under American administration for East Asia, for Japan, South Korea, and China. But that, of course, cannot happen overnight. These are long-term projects. But importing from Russia and also importing from the States can happen pretty soon. Not very easy, not immediately, but can happen if we talk about a period of several months.
What, if I may ask, if the crisis continue to escalate, when might Tokyo decide to tap into these stockpile and reserves?
Well, they have already started tapping into them. On the 16th of March, they released 15 days worth of oil from the reserves that are in the deposits of private companies. Of course, these are deposits of private companies, but under the supervision of the state, because as we know, this project of like the strategic oil reserves are coordinated by the state and mandated by the state. So all the oil importing companies have their own stockpiles, but these are managed by the government. The decisions about releasing the oil is done by the government, and the government issued the orders on the 16th of March to these companies to release 15 days worth of oil. And there is talk about releasing also a month's worth of oil from the governmental stockpiles.
You mentioned companies' facilities. Now, what is the significance of storage facilities, let's say, operated by Saudi Aramco in Okinawa for Japan's energy securities?
Well, Okinawa is a group of islands in the southernmost part of Japan, very close to Taiwan, very close to China, and Taiwan is part of China, of course. And this is where most of the American military in Japan is. So more than 50% of the American bases and personnel are in Okinawa. So Okinawa is in a very strategic place, and in case there is conflict, because many people are saying that the American administration have been shifting its strategic focus from the Middle East to East Asia, but now again we are going back to a conflict in the Middle East. But the long-term strategic analysis was saying that in case there is a conflict in East Asia, that Okinawa has a very vital role. That's why there is a heavy American military presence. And in that context, this cooperation with Saudi Arabia to supply oil and stockpile it there has very significant strategic importance. And also it's worth mentioning that it's not only a cooperation with Saudi Arabia. There's another part in Japan, in Kagoshima, which is also in the south of the country, but not as far south. There is also a stockpiling activity project in coordination with the United Arab Emirates.
And how could these facilities play a larger role in mitigating the supply shocks?
Well, all this put together, it's part of an international network that is coordinated by the International Energy Organization. And this we're talking about collaboration between all kinds of countries. Like, for example, even the oil reserves in Japan can be shared with other countries. Like, for example, Japan has agreements to share it with South Korea, the Republic of Korea, and also even with New Zealand. New Zealand has the right to buy oil from Japan in case of crisis in market prices, plus an option, plus a premium. And so it's a sophisticated network of collaboration between countries to make sure that they all stand together and try to withhold crises together.
And Mr. Najib, if I can ask you, how are rising oil prices affecting Japan's economy, especially given the weakened yen?
Well, actually it is. Prices are going up, prices of gasoline, and accordingly after that, of course, it affects all kinds of prices of all kinds of products, because whether it's important food products or whether it's manufactured in Japan, because everything relies at the end on oil. Now the government subsidies have been continuing, but also the government has pressured Japanese companies, and now for the first time the negotiations to raise salaries in Japan went very, very smoothly, and the Japan Economic Federation completely and immediately agreed with the demands of the workers' union and agreed to raise the salaries by 5%. Now that is going to help families, that's going to increase the purchasing power, but also it is expected to lead to more inflation.
Should we expect stronger inflationary pressure in the coming period?
Yes, that is very much expected, and this is why the Bank of Japan might be expected to raise interest at the end of this month.
Now, if we return back to the crisis in the region, how is Japan diplomatically navigating the tensions in the Gulf?
Well, Japan at the beginning was very strongly against Iran, and there were always news about condemning Iran. And when Takaichi went to Washington, Prime Minister Takaichi, she was really praising the President Trump, and it seems that the Japanese have put all their eggs in one basket, as they say. But as the crisis is being prolonged, it seems that Japan realizes that it's really in a crisis that even Washington cannot control. That's why we saw that in the recent visit by the French president to Tokyo, that the two countries tried to say that they have their own stance. They will be coordinating regarding with OPEC countries also, regarding the production of oil, and also among them regarding the release of oil stockpiles, and also that both countries will not participate in military operations, but they could extend the technological help when the military operations cease. I think that gave them a more balanced approach to the crisis, and that could open door to more diplomatic maneuvering in the region.
That's interesting, because we know that Japan's constitution is against participating in wars. Now, could Tokyo play a political or mediating role in this crisis if it prolongs?
Yes, well, if we look at the history of relations, Japanese relations with Iran are also very strong. So actually, I was personally surprised because of the very strict stand towards Iran at the beginning of this crisis. I thought that Japan is throwing away its diplomatic leverage, but in the following weeks, the language changed, and it seems that Japan is looking more at being on middle grounds. And actually, Iran has been trying to open channels of communications with Japan, and these channels could be used for diplomatic purposes if needed in the future.
Now, we all noticed that the crisis in the Middle East had a huge effect on global supply chains. How long can Japan hold out if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed?
Well, theoretically 9 months. And we have to know that when we talk about the Japanese economy, Japan has moved gradually from exporting from Japan into building factories around the world, and there have been several stages. The first, the concentration was in China only, but then after relations with China deteriorated, now Japan has many plants in other Asian countries, in Vietnam, Thailand, in other places in Indonesia. And also after the recent developments by the Trump administration and the tariffs and all that, they started also expanding their plants inside the United States. Before that, they had plants in Mexico, targeting the American market. So Japan's economy is really globalized, spread around all continents, and producing Japanese goods around the world. So when we talk about the Japanese economy, I mean, Japan itself can survive for 9 months without oil imports, theoretically. But the different parts of the economy that are spread around the world are all under the conditions of the country where they are based.
Now, if as you mentioned, they've released some of the reserves in Japan's stockpile, and with the announcement of the ceasefire now, is Japan currently in a safe position or still at risk from the energy crisis?
Well, let's say the Japanese are really following closely what's happening, and there is a sense of relief with the ceasefire, although the official position of the Japanese government is very, very close to America, even more than usual. But there is a sense of relief that because there have been many question marks about the American plan. You know, there's a huge discrepancy between what American President Donald Trump is saying and what is actually happening on the ground. There's a lot of vagueness and a lot of question marks about the plans. And, you know, Japanese are famous for loving plans and loving clear, you know, like agendas. So this sense makes them really happy with the ceasefire now, and there are high hopes that America will go along with it, and that the crisis will end soon.
And Mr. Najib, before we let you go, I would like to know what is a worst case scenario for Tokyo?
Well, the worst case scenario is that the crisis would go for months and months, and that Japan fails to import enough oil. For Japan, that would be a real disaster, because this country has no natural resources, and the industry is completely reliant on oil from the Middle East at the current stage. And if we see documentaries and pictures about what happened in Japan in 1973, the first oil shock, there was real panic, and there was a huge shock to the whole economy. And we have to remember that not only the industry, even this country relies on importing food. It does not, Japan does not produce what it consumes when it comes to food security, and that is also a very big, like the country is very fragile in this sense. So if there is no short-term solution, Japan can really suffer deeply.
Our correspondent from Tokyo, Najib Al-Khash, we appreciate all the information. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a quick break and we'll continue with our live coverage.
في في ظل الأوضاع الراهنة معكم اليوم وزارة التجارة والصناعة المعنية في ملف الأمن الغذائي. اليوم نطمنكم بأن الوضع التمويني مستقر تماما ولا يوجد أي نقص في المواد الغذائية الأساسية. كذلك حركة الأسواق طبيعية والسلع متوفرة في نقاط البيع والمخازن بشكل منتظم. إنتاج المياه في المصانع المحلية مستمر على مدار الساعة لضمان تلبية احتياجات الجميع. سلاسل الإمداد تعمل بشكل طبيعي وسلس ولا توجد أي عوائق في تدفق السلع إلى الأسواق، كما أن الأسواق المركزية وجميع نقاط البيع تعمل بشكل طبيعي، والجمعيات التعاونية تواصل نشاطها المعتاد دون أي تأثير. ونؤكد على الجاهزية الكاملة لخطط الطوارئ مع استمرار فرق الرقابة التجارية في متابعة الأسواق ميدانيا بشكل يومي لضمان استقرار الأسعار وتوفر السلع الأساسية فيها. لذلك اليوم احنا نطمنكم ونبشركم بأن الأمور طيبة إن شاء الله ويحافظ الله.
Welcome back to our daily live coverage. Now, across the region, facilities tied to water and power, including desalination plants, have been damaged or exposed to risk as Iranian strikes extend beyond traditional targets. A single strike, however, is unlikely to shut off the Gulf water supply. The system is designed to absorb isolation disruption, but sustained or multi-site attacks could begin to strain supply far more quickly. Here's more.
Professor of Water and Environmental Engineering at Heriot Watt University, Dubai, says that in the Gulf, desalination is built with enough breathing room that losing one plant doesn't immediately show up at the tap. In Kuwait, Iranian drone attacks have damaged 2 power and desalination facilities and ignited fires at 2 oil sites. Other sites, including Fujairah in the UAE, have been identified as potentially exposed. Andreas Krieg, senior lecturer at the School of Security Studies at King's College London, says water infrastructure occupies a distinct category. Water infrastructure is not just another utility. In places that depend on desalination, it underpins civilian survival, public health, hospital function, sanitation, and basic state legitimacy. Krieg notes that international humanitarian law gives special protection to civilian objects and to objects indispensable to the survival of the civilian population, which is why attacks on water systems carry such grave legal and moral weight. The incidents highlight a structural reality. Desalination is central to water supply in the Gulf, and disruption carries immediate implications for daily life. At first glance, desalination appears vulnerable. Shut down a plant and supply is reduced. In practice, the system is designed with layers of redundancy. Plants operate across multiple locations, allowing output to be redistributed if one facility slows down. Water is also stored at different points across the network, including central reservoirs and building-level tanks, creating a buffer that delays disruption. Veolia, an environmental services provider whose technologies account for nearly 19% of desalination capacity in the region, says the region's water supply is diversified thanks to a network of numerous facilities distributed along the coastline. The company adds that distribution systems are interconnected, allowing plants to support and substitute for one another when necessary, helping maintain continuity of service. Veolia says that in the UAE, storage capacity typically covers around 1 week, while in other parts of the region, it may be limited to 2 or 3 days. In practice, this means the system can absorb disruption for a limited period. Once reserves are depleted, water supply depends on whether plants can continue producing enough water to meet demand. Unlike most regions, the Gulf does not rely on rivers or rainfall. It depends on a network of desalination plants along its coastline that convert seawater into potable water on a continuous basis. Seawater is drawn into treatment facilities, filtered and processed either through reverse osmosis, forcing it through membranes to remove salt and impurities, or through thermal methods that evaporate and condense water. The resulting supply is distributed through pipelines, stored in reservoirs, and delivered to homes, hospitals, and industry. This is not a flexible system. It is designed to operate continuously, producing water at a scale that sustains cities, industrial activity, and essential services. Gulf states produce roughly 40% of the world's desalinated water, operating more than 400 plants across the region. Dependence varies by country, but is high everywhere. In Kuwait, it provides around 90% of drinking water, while in the UAE, desalination accounts for 41 to 42% of total water supply, and in Saudi Arabia, approximately 70%. For residents, disruption would not be felt immediately. water would continue to flow. Rostom explains that buildings are supported by internal storage and pumping systems, meaning early changes in supply may not be apparent. In many cases, water pressure remains stable even as the wider system adjusts. That buffer allows cities to absorb short-term disruption with multiple plants, storage reserves, and monitoring systems working to maintain continuity. More significant impacts would only begin to emerge if several parts of the system were affected at once. In those scenarios, the system's ability to compensate becomes more limited. Sustained disruption would pose a broader challenge given that water supply underpins hospital sterilization systems, sanitation networks, cooling infrastructure, and industrial operations. Over time, therefore, the implications will extend beyond households and impact essential services and economic activity as well. Rostom says the system's resilience depends on disruption remaining contained, explaining that cities depend on steady desalination output but are not running without a headrest, pointing to strategic reserves, aquifer recharge, and the distribution of production across multiple plants. That buffer helps absorb short-term shocks, but it does not remove the system's reliance on continuous operation. He added that the delicate spots are the seawater intake, the power feeding the plant, and the distribution network. Each one has layers of monitoring and backup. If disruption persists or affects multiple parts of the system simultaneously, the ability to compensate becomes more limited. In those scenarios, supply would increasingly depend on plants continuing to operate and on the wider network maintaining output. Rostom notes that even when intake is affected, for example by contamination, plants can slow or pause operations while the wider system compensates, but that depends on distribution being local and short-lived. As Krieg puts it, modern conflict increasingly places pressure not only on military targets, but on the systems that sustain civilian life. The effects are not always immediate, but once they begin, they move quickly through homes, hospitals, and the structures that support everyday life. In the Gulf, where water is produced rather than naturally sourced, that makes desalination not just infrastructure, but a point of vulnerability that is difficult to replace and even harder to ignore. A senior official at the Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, or ESCWA, warned that if the Middle East conflict escalates further and desalination plants are hit, the disruption would affect the water supply to millions of people. Ziad Khayat, who is a senior sustainable development officer at ESCWA, noted that water access and management in the Middle East and in the Arab region is characterized by severe and growing scarcity, which places a significant pressure on already limited resources. Khayat said there are around 50 million people, which is around 11% of the population, lacking access to basic drinking water services. Gulf Cooperation Council member states have invested largely in non-conventional water sources and desalination, with more than 400 desalination plants and nearly 40 million people, 65% of the population, depending to varying degrees on desalinated water from the Gulf. In addition to a direct hit, Khayat said many of these desalination plants are also linked to power stations and power supply. So even if power facilities are affected, these desalination plants will also be affected, affecting the water supply immediately to millions of people. He added that any contamination to Gulf waters, which are the intakes for these plants, would also affect the desalination plants in the Gulf. Attacks on any civilian infrastructure that supplies water to the population at large is a war crime. It's a breach of international humanitarian law and, more importantly, would be a humanitarian disaster in the Gulf where millions and millions of people depend on such facilities. A lot of the Gulf countries have invested in strategic reserves, whether using managed aquifer recharge or constructing large storage tanks. However, infrastructure alone will not be enough, and what is needed is public awareness and reducing consumption. Khayat expressed hope that negotiations and leaders reach to a point where water is a connector, where water is a peace pathway rather than a conflict pathway in a very water-scarce region.
Welcome back once again to our daily live coverage. Now, joining us via Zoom is our correspondent in London, Mr. Jamal Shaheen, to discuss the UK's response to the ceasefire, the impact of the oil prices, volatility on British markets, as well as London's diplomatic role moving forward. First of all, Mr. Jamal, we appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you in this program.
Now, Mr. Jamal, first off, we heard today from the Prime Minister's office that Prime Minister Keir Starmer is welcoming the temporary ceasefire and is planning a visit to the Gulf region to secure and continue the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. Can you elaborate more on this situation?
Yes, already Mr. Keir Starmer has arrived to Saudi Arabia just like 5 minutes ago. And there is a joint statement from the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Italy and other. They are welcome with the announcement of the ceasefire, which concluded between the United States and Iran. They also thank Pakistan and the mediator for their effort to stop this war. But the goal, let me read the statement because it's a very important statement by a couple of countries. The goal must be now to be negotiation to a swift and lasting end of the war coalition for lasting and security and stability, peace in the Strait of Hormuz and GCC countries. And this is a very important issue. Now, the most important issue is to degrade the capability of Iran for threatening its neighbor country and find a solution not to allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. In the same time, one of the most important efforts is international effort, the support diplomatic effort, and the close contact with the United States and its partner. They will work together to guarantee the free navigation at the Strait of Hormuz at this time to avoid any negative impact to the world and the global economy. This is a very important issue. In the same time, Mr. Keir Starmer said he welcomes what's happening today. He welcomes the ceasefire, and he's planning to travel to GCC country to meet with the GCC country leader for the arrangements in the couple of days and in the future, how to hold this ceasefire. Instead, what we see now is a little bit fragile ceasefire. If we look to what's happening in Lebanon, and also we need to find a conclusion about what we can do to security and stability, the world economy and the supply of energy by the free navigation of the Strait of Hormuz.
You mentioned the fragility of the ceasefire. How is London assessing the credibility of this escalation? Does the UK view it as a genuine diplomatic breakthrough or a fragile pause before further escalation?
The Prime Minister described it as a moment of happiness, as a moment of relief, as a moment of good. Everybody was waiting for to work to find the diplomatic solution, to build on how to go far. But there is most of the political leaders here, from the opposition and the other, even some of the journalists and the media, is not happy what they seen in Lebanon. Nearly more than 100 died. They think that the Israeli occupation, would like to destroy any international effort to hold the ceasefire, and they are planning to damage any ceasefire. There is a huge need and a desperate need to build on and hold this private ceasefire instead of going back to disability again. This is one of the most important of the visit of Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and this is what the joint statement about the leader of the most prestigious European country together just like 10 minutes ago. We need to build on, we need to have a huge diplomatic effort to support the ceasefire and build on in the next stage after 2 weeks.
With his visit to the region, how is the UK now positioning itself diplomatically as the focus shift from crisis response to ensuring the Strait of Hormuz actually reopens and remain secure?
One of the most important issues, what I have heard today from the former Foreign Minister, James Cleverly, he said we need to work very hard. The UK government needs to take any opportunity under the world because Iran is missed and have a good experience in damaging any chance to have a solid and the last agreement in the Middle East. He said he had a lot of experience. A little experience during his time at the Foreign Office about this. This is one of the most important issues. This is why the United Kingdom Prime Minister is traveled to coordinate with GCC country. The GCC country is a key role and a key partner how to make the stability and the freedom of the navigation, which makes the security and the stability of the world global energy. This is very, very important now. They are not allowing Iran to charge any shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Because if you read the text or the script between the language and what is in some Arabic media and Iranian media, they talk about a withdrawal from all foreign force from the region. This is not in the ticket. They said about they accept the uranium enrichment. This is not what they said. Even the defense secretary for the United States hour ago in his press conference said many things is completely different. This is why we need to build the trust and build the confidence between the parties to have agreement and the framework and the common ground to go back like normal. In the end of the day, Iran is a part of our region, and also in the end of the day, the GCC country have interest, the whole world have interest in this issue. This is why Keir Starmer and I expect other leaders, European leaders, will be in Middle East and especially in GCC countries in the next couple of days to arrange with them how the world should be after this war.
Mm-hmm. And also, Jamal, I would like to ask you, how has this shift to the negotiated pause influenced public opinion in the UK regarding the potential military involvement and alignment with Washington?
First of all, we expect a new positive thing by end of this month. His Majesty the Queen, the King, the Charlotte will travel to a state visit to United States. He will meet with the chairman of the Congress or the Speaker of the Congress, and also with Donald Trump. And this will be a good sign to the relationship between both of the countries, because the situation was not only UK, it's also all of EU was not accepting the war against Iran from the beginning, and they are not accepting any appalling attack by Iranians. They are not accepting any arrangement will give the same advantage and the same international right according to the international law to the GCC country and other countries. One of the most important things, the shifting should be guaranteed the interest of the United Kingdom and other world.
And before we let you go, Mr. Jamal, now with Iran previously rejecting the temporary ceasefire, but now is entering the limited time agreement, how does the UK assess the prospect of long-term settlement, and could London play a role in shaping what comes after the next 2 weeks?
Okay. This question is from two parts. The first one, is the United Kingdom have a role in this ceasefire? No. The answer is no. The Minister for Security confirmed the United Kingdom was not a part of any mediation or any mediation to reach this truce or ceasefire. But according to what Prime Minister Keir Starmer said, he is ready to do whatever it can to find a lasting and security peace and agreement. This agreement, as we said before, should guarantee the future of navigation. This should be arranged and coordinated with other European countries and with the United States. Let's forget. Yesterday there was a meeting for military planner. It was happened like 5 hours before the truce or the ceasefire was announced. They have said they will have another meeting in the coming day with their counterpart from GCC country and from United States to make a new strategy and a new policy how to guarantee the freedom of navigation. And on the 13th of April, there is a meeting with the International Maritime Organization to organize with other countries how this should be, how the future should be, because this is the only guarantee for the security and the stability. Let's forget when. Let me say something. The world, the stock market, it's refreshed and have a huge improvement in its performance. Like, for example, FTSE 100, it becomes a higher 2.5%, which is a huge number. Also in Germany and the other country. This is very important to have, for every country to support the lasting and security and stability in the Middle East and for the economic world.
Our correspondent in London, Mr. Jamal Shaheen, we appreciate all the information. Dear viewers, let's take a quick break and we'll continue.
تؤكد جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي جاهزيتها للاستجابة للطوارئ والكوارث في ظل الأوضاع الجيوسياسية الحاصلة في المنطقة. جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي تعمل من ضمن منظومة إنسانية متكاملة مع مؤسسات دولة الكويت من حيث الاستجابة السريعة وتجهيز المتطوعين من ضمن أفرقة مختلفة للاستجابة للطوارئ في سرعة قصوى. يعد متطوعين جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي من المتطوعين اللي تم تدريبهم مكثفاً في الإسعافات الأولية والاستجابة للكوارث والاستجابة الميدانية. تؤكد جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي جاهزيتها الميدانية ورفع جاهزيتها من حيث الاستجابة للطوارئ في حالات اللي يتم ندائها. بالنسبة للمخزون الاستراتيجي لجمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي فإحنا على أتم الاستعداد للاستجابة في حال النداء من قبل مؤسسات حكومة دولة الكويت.
And in regional updates, Israeli occupation forces launched renewed strikes across Lebanon, hitting the southern region and Beirut's outskirts, killing civilians and causing widespread destruction as occupation forces operate inside southern Lebanon amid an expanding ground offensive. As a result of this, 1.2 million people, or 1/5 of the population, have been forced to flee their homes in the last month. Here's more.
The Israeli occupation's latest invasion of Lebanon has forced more than 1.2 million people, including 350,000 children, to flee their homes, creating one of the world's fastest growing and most severe displacement crises. 1 in 5 people in Lebanon, or 20% of the country's 5.9 million population, has been displaced by occupation attacks over the past month. Compared with other displacement crises, Lebanon's is among the top 10 in recent years. Global displacement numbers are taken from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees 2025 data, which were used to compare the rate of displacement per population. These numbers include refugees, internally displaced persons, asylum seekers, and other displaced people. Lebanon's figures reflect the most recent available data. Numbers for all countries may shift as displacement crises continue to evolve worldwide. According to Armed Conflict Location and Event Data, or ACLED, an independent monitor, occupation forces have launched more than 1,840 attacks on Lebanon since March 2nd. 1,486 were air or drone attacks, and 318 were shelling, artillery, or missile attacks. Attacks have killed more than 1,497 people and injured more than 4,639, according to Lebanon's Ministry of Public Health. Last week, occupation authorities said the occupation plans to destroy Lebanese border towns and continue its occupation of the south of the country. Data from ACLED shows that between March 2nd and March 27th, there were more than 2,000 attacks in Lebanon. The occupation says it is targeting southern Lebanon and the southern suburbs of Beirut, the Beqa' Valley, and Ba'albek in eastern Lebanon. These attacks have had huge consequences for local people. Air attacks in western Beqa' have severed key routes between villages, including the roads between towns in the Beqa' region, according to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. In the first week of the conflict, the occupation issued displacement orders for Beirut's southern suburbs, the Beqa' region, and the full area south of the Litani River. Then on March 12th, the occupation army expanded its forced displacement orders for residents of southern Lebanon, from the Litani River to north of the Zahrani River, about 40 kilometers north of the border with the occupied Palestinian territory. Towns in southern Lebanon are among those facing displacement of local populations as the occupation establishes new military posts in the area. In the southern Lebanon Marjayoun district, Khiam, strategically located and seen as a gateway to southern Lebanon, has faced intense fighting in recent weeks, forcing people to leave. According to the Norwegian Refugee Council, the occupation's sweeping evacuation orders now cover more than 14% of the country's territory. Meanwhile, in Gaza, Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are struggling to meet their daily bread needs amid shortages of supplies entering the enclave and a lack of money. In Gaza City, people walked through flooded streets on Tuesday as war-damaged drainage systems failed to clear the roads. Dozens waited in a long line at a bread distribution point where a $1 bag of about 15 loaves was being sold, barely enough, residents said, to feed their large families. Some people were seen reselling the bags for as much as $6 each. The Israeli occupation's 2-year genocide in Gaza has been muffled by a fragile ceasefire since last October, but now people in Gaza fear the military escalation in the Middle East is overshadowing the territory's dire humanitarian needs and holding off reconstruction plans. Jamal Hamed, a displaced resident from the northern Gaza Strip, said in addition to bread shortages, the lack of small cash change is also a problem, as many people cannot use digital payment apps. Nariman Qasim, a woman who is raising 6 orphans, said she has been standing in line for several hours since early morning. People stood for hours in the pouring rain outside a bread distribution point, pushing to reach the front of the line as supplies ran low. In related news, the Egyptian Red Crescent launched a convoy of trucks stocked with urgent humanitarian aid heading to the Gaza Strip. This initiative is part of the Red Crescent's ongoing efforts as the national mechanism for coordinating aid to Gaza. The convoy included over 44,000 food baskets, approximately 460 tons of flour, more than 760 tons of relief supplies and personal hygiene items, and about 1,435 tons of petroleum products to operate hospitals and vital facilities in the Strip. The Egyptian Red Crescent has also delivered other essential supplies to Gaza, including clothing items and over 4,745 tents to shelter those affected. The Egyptian Red Crescent at the Rafah crossing is also preparing to receive the 32nd group of wounded, sick, and injured Palestinians, both arriving and departing, along with their companions, and facilitating their passage. The Rafah crossing has never been closed from the Egyptian side, and the organization has maintained its readiness at all logistical centers, continuing its efforts to deliver over 900,000 tons of humanitarian and relief aid.
The United Nations Security Council failed to adopt a draft resolution on the Strait of Hormuz after Russia and China voted against the measure, exposing deep division among major powers. The proposal introduced by Bahrain in coordination with GCC states and Jordan called for coordinated defensive effort to secure navigation and demanded Iran halt attacks on commercial vessel and civilian infrastructure. The United States warned the blockage was disrupting humanitarian aid routes, affecting dozens of relief organizations. However, Russia argued that the resolution risked escalating conflict and enabling further military action, while China criticized it is unbalanced. Now joining us live is our correspondent in Geneva, Dina Bisab, to discuss with us more on the UN responses on the Strait of Hormuz as well as the humanitarian coordination. Dina, first of all, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
Now, UN agencies in Geneva are reporting rising humanitarian needs as the strikes persist and civilian populations flee conflict zones. How are the WHO and UNHCR coordinating these response from Geneva, and what are the challenges that they are highlighting in aid delivery?
Actually, in the wake of the ceasefire, WHO and UNHCR in Geneva are shifting from emergency responses mode towards stabilization and breathing space planning. Both agencies report that the pause in major strikes has allowed some transport corridors to reopen, enabling the delivery of medicines, vaccines, and basic shelter to displaced families who fled border areas and urban centers as well. However, they stress that the ceasefire is only 2 weeks long and that millions remain in precarious conditions with damaged hospitals, overstretched water treatment system, and uncertain access to food. UNHCR is scaling up support for host communities in neighboring countries, while WHO is coordinating with national health authorities to assess the risk of disease outbreaks, of course, in the truce breakdown. Their message from Geneva is direct to the world that the world cannot treat the ceasefire as a political stunt. It must be used to build genuinely protected humanitarian pathways.
And as, for example, international bodies like the IMF and World Bank, how or what role are the Geneva-based organizations playing in linking humanitarian protection with economic and energy security strategies?
Geneva used and is playing always a very important role because it's becoming more and more a link between humanitarian organizations and the area of crisis, like the current crisis in Iran and the Gulf region. So the temporary truce includes an understanding that Iran will sit for talks with the USA in a separate parallel format, away from Geneva, of course, but Geneva and the organizations, international organizations here, are focusing more and more about the situation, about the truce period, and pushing also to keep it as a ceasefire, not only a truce of two weeks. Mm-hmm. So diplomatically, all the missions in Geneva are pushing towards this status now. And of course, the organizations, international organizations, have more access now to the region than before because, of course, the lines are all open to reach the ground and to look closely to the amount of damage which happened during the last weeks. Of course, another track should take place in The Hague after, maybe, because those attacks caused direct damage to civilians and to civilian places. So countries Gulf countries in general talked a lot about this subject, about raising some cases in the international court of course, to focus more about the humanitarian situation and the attacks of those civilian places in the Gulf region.
Also, Dina, with the global energy markets under severe strain from the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, how is the UN in Geneva addressing concerns over food and medicine supply chains that are increasingly choked by rising costs and logistical blockage?
The UN in Geneva is cautiously hopeful that the ceasefire will ease the acute strain on global food and medicine supply chains. But it's also warning that the window is very narrow. The halt in major attacks on shipping and infrastructure has allowed more tankers to resume transit through the Strait of Hormuz, while is expected to bring down freight costs and ease pressure on fertilizers and fuel deliveries. However, UN agency report that the damage to regional ports and logistics networks during the escalation phase means that even a short-term breakdown in the truce could quickly rechoke supply routes. Humanitarian stocks of insulin, vaccines, trauma supplies remain fragile as well, especially in low and middle income countries that depend on timely shipments. Geneva-based officials are therefore urging that the ceasefire be extended to a longer-term de-escalation arrangement with guaranteed humanitarian corridors and clear rules of the road of shipping and, of course, air transport as well.
Which brings me to my last question, Dina. The UN Security Council or Security General Antonio Guterres has welcomed the temporary ceasefire, but also warned of a potential regional escalation. How is this warning resonating within the UN offices in Geneva, and what practical steps are Geneva-based missions are taking to push for de-escalation through international humanitarian frameworks?
Indeed, Antonio Guterres' stark warning on wider regional escalation has taken on new urgency in Geneva as the ceasefire tries to hold. Within UN offices here, staff are explicitly framing the two-week truce as a test of whether the parties are serious about avoiding a border war that would deepen a humanitarian catastrophe and destabilize global markets. And Geneva-based missions are quietly pushing for a de-escalation package that goes beyond the military pause, respect for international humanitarian rules, law and protection of civilians and critical infrastructures, and the establishment of monitoring mechanisms that can verify compliance. UN envoys are also pushing to link the ceasefire to long-term mediation efforts, including the US-backed comprehensive plan on Gaza and the border nuclear security talks. The message from Geneva, simple yet ambitious. This fragile truce must become the first step towards a regionally anchored, law-based settlement, not just a temporary breathing space before the next round of violence.
Our correspondent in Geneva, Ms. Dina Bisaab, we appreciate all this input. Dear viewers, let's take a quick break and we'll continue.
في ظل الأوضاع الراهنة معكم اليوم وزارة التجارة والصناعة المعنية في ملف الأمن الغذائي. اليوم نطمنكم بأن الوضع التمويني مستقر تماما ولا يوجد أي نقص في المواد الغذائية الأساسية. كذلك حركة الأسواق طبيعية والسلع متوفرة في نقاط البيع والمخازن بشكل منتظم. إنتاج المياه في المصانع المحلية مستمر على مدار الساعة لضمان تلبية احتياجات الجميع. سلاسل الإمداد تعمل بشكل طبيعي وسلس ولا توجد أي عوائق في تدفق السلع إلى الأسواق. كما أن الأسواق المركزية وجميع نقاط البيع تعمل بشكل طبيعي والجمعيات التعاونية تواصل نشاطها المعتاد دون أي تأثير. ونؤكد على الجاهزية الكاملة لخطط الطوارئ مع استمرار فرق الرقابة التجارية في متابعة الأسواق ميدانياً بشكل يومي لضمان استقرار الأسعار وتوفر السلع الأساسية فيها. لذلك اليوم احنا نطمنكم ونبشركم بأن الأمور طيبة إن شاء الله ويحافظ الله.
And lastly, World Bank President Ajay Banga warned that the ongoing Middle East conflict is likely to weigh in on global growth and push inflation higher, regardless of how quickly it ends. Speaking ahead of the World Bank and the IMF spring meeting, Banga said the economic impact will depend on how severely energy markets are disrupted. Global growth, previously projected at 2.83%, could fall by 0.3 to 0.4% points and just over 1% in the prolonged crisis, while inflation could rise up to 0.9 points. He noted that the World Bank could deploy up to $30 billion in rapid support, potentially rising to $70 billion. However, he cautions against costly subsidies, warning they could worsen long-term physical pressure. As we conclude today's live daily coverage, we urge all citizens and residents to closely follow the guidelines issued by the Ministry of Interior and all relevant authorities. Remember to distinguish among the three different siren tones, understand each signal, and remain calm during any emergency. Always seek information only from official sources and avoid sharing unverified news or rumors. Spreading misinformation can lead to serious repercussion. Stay informed, vigilant, and responsible. Help protect yourself, your family, and the community. Cooperation and adherence to official instructions are essential in maintaining the safety, stability, and public trust during these hard times. We pray to Allah Almighty for a continued safety and security of our beloved Kuwait and the entire GCC region. Take care.